Quand j'avais un peu matin, midi, soir, on était ensemble à la rue Princesse, au milieu maquillot, à salle faut payer les poulets. L'argent est fini, en tout a changé de côté. Waribana, elle a changé de côté. Nangere nangere wa, 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 nangere nangere wa. Di premier gaou n'est pas gaou. C'est deuxième gaou qui est nyatao. On dit premier gaou n'est pas. C'est deuxième gaou qui est nyatao. We haven't met, but I've known you for a while. Your life begins, my breath is short, but it's like I can run another 1,000 miles. I remember when my mother said, it's a holy tie only nature can create. My everlasting hunger came to a close. I was walking fearlessly, but now I fly. I hear your voice deep in the water. With you, everything is worth a try. I feel your love. You are my shelter. You're the hope. You're the reason why the life begins.
So, Sharon,
Breath is short, but it's like I can run another 1,000 miles. My everlasting hunger came to a close. I was
Sharon,
walking fearlessly, but
can you please?
now I fly.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. Let me just turn on my camera for you guys to see me. And if you can turn on yours, please let me see your beautiful faces. I hope you're well. My name is Sharon Maitha, Communications Officer for YWEN Youth in Action, and it is a pleasure to see you on this call. And thank you for letting me know where you're joining in from. Just to check, I have a few from Lesotho, Mozambique, we have Ethiopia, we have Kenya, Eswatini, So welcome all. If you can introduce yourself in your language, we'll really appreciate that. Just learning from the various 54 African countries' languages. But as I introduced myself, my name is Sharon Maitha, Communications and Social Media Officer for YWEN Youth in Action, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this webinar, an intergenerational dialogue on behalf of the Youth Power Hub in partnership with YWEN Youth in Action under Amref Health Africa, AfriYAN ESA, and UNFPA ESARO. So this year's theme is The Girl I Am, the Change I Lead, Girls on the Frontlines of Crisis, and we're here today to commemorate and just take stock for International Day of the Girl Child, reminding us that we are not only facing the toughest global challenges, we have climate change, we have economic wars, we are having also a lot of challenges globally, but we are also leading the way in solving them as young women and advocates in this space. So while we are also responding to climate shocks and we are addressing gender-based violence, we are addressing cultural harmful norms such as child marriage, female genital mutilation and cutting. And we are also driving innovation in our communities, as we've seen all through this month. The girls across Africa are just redefining what it means to lead from the front lines, even when the systems are not built for them. And our conversation today will draw a lot of inspirations from the findings of the State of the World Population 2025 report released by the UNFPA. I'm sure you all joined the webinar in July that we had for World Population Day, just to tackle the various thematic areas that were within that report, which reframes the global narrative on fertility and population by focusing on what truly matters for young girls, which is reproductive agency. But before we start, just a few house rules. If you can, please keep your microphone muted. If you can, also, we want to see you guys on camera, your lovely faces from all over East and Southern Africa. If you're joining us outside ESARO region, pleasure to have you on board. We also have translation with us. So if you're French speaking, there's a world button right below your screen. You can see right there, you can take French. If you speak in Portuguese, then you can still find it there. And thank you for also joining and reminding us of why we also need to be quite versatile in how we're addressing youth issues and youth priorities across Africa. So today, basically, we are reminded that the real crisis is not about the numbers, it's about the choice that young girls have. So when young women and young girls are making choices about their education, their bodies, their futures, they are unlocking many progress in their societies. And that is what we're here to learn more about today, just hearing from women and young advocates, youth advocates who are just making agency real even in times of this crisis that we're experiencing in 2025. So we will be exploring how policy, advocacy, and community leadership intersect, just to ensure that every young girl can lead with confidence and also that power in their communities. So it is my pleasure to welcome Miss Meron Neguse from UNFPA ESARO. She's a program specialist just here to deliver the keynote remarks. Welcome, Meron, and over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you very much, YWEN team and AfriYAN, for inviting me to be to have a conversation with you. This is an honor for me and for UNFPA as well. Sharon, you addressed it very well. It is very high time that we have to discuss the well-being of the adolescent girls, which is really being compromised by so many other priorities that are really affecting fund allocation, program priority, and investment on adolescent girls. I would like to share a slide which will frame my keynote for this morning. Let me share. Yeah, you can see my screen. Yes? Please confirm.
Yes, Meron, we can.
Okay, yeah. So you see the adolescent girl at the left edge of the triangle, which shows different scenario for adolescent girls that we have globally. When you see the red line, it shows if adolescent girls are not going to school and if they don't have the opportunity to go to school and to have a comprehensive support from the government, from the family, from the community, then it's high likely they will leave school. And then they might be married. And then teen and repeat pregnancies might happen to them because they will not be deciding on their bodily autonomy. They will not have access to SRHR services. So they will be mothers when they should have been in the school. And then because they are giving birth at the very early age, they will be exposed to maternal and neonatal morbidity and mortality. And then if they survived the teenage pregnancy, because their likelihood of them going to school is very low, they will join informal work, which is not paying well, or it is even, sometimes we call it poverty with an employment. Because yes, you are paid, but you are not even covering your basic needs. And on top of that, you have a child. So imagine how we are compromising the livelihood and the developmental opportunity of that adolescent girl. And then on top of that, as Sharon mentioned, there are so many insecurities that we are hearing these days in our region, outside our region, that is also affecting the development of our countries, like the war in Ukraine, the displacement in Gaza, the one in Sudan, the unrest in the western part of the continent, the one that we had in this part of the continent, even in Kenya, Tanzania, as we speak, DRC. All these are really affecting the security and the well-being of adolescent girls more than anyone else being affected by this crisis. And then once they get into their old age and into the middle age, they will be high likely in the poverty cycle than really winning their livelihood. So it is a vicious circle that we are creating because we didn't invest on the adolescent girls. It's just not one adolescent girl, it is a community. It is the whole nation that we are really compromising because we are not investing on adolescent girls. But if the scenario is otherwise, if the adolescent girl has the chance to go to school and continue her school, her education to the secondary school and tertiary school, and she is employed, she has the likelihood of getting decent employment. She has the likelihood of choosing if she wants to have family or not. And then she has the likelihood of being a healthy mother, and then with healthy children, prosperous family, security of place, wealth and investment. And when she is getting old, she will be in a better position to cherish that age also. So the investment that we are doing at adolescent girl is also affecting the old age group. So it is the whole community development that we are talking about. And what facilitative environment can we create for the adolescent girls not to go to the red line, but to the green line? We can have the CC program that we are always promoting, and despite all the pushbacks that we are facing, as simple as menstrual health, we have talked a lot, so many times with the Youth Power Hub, with the champions and AfriYAN, to really make, to advocate towards making menstrual health accessible. It seems like it's very simple, but it has a huge impact on the livelihood of adolescent girls. I'm Ethiopian, and I might have told you, sorry if I repeat the story. Whenever I go to the northern part of the country, I really wonder if we will be able to meet universal access to girls' education just because menstrual health is not accessible to adolescent girls. They have to travel 2-3 kilometers, 5 kilometers to school and going back to home, 5 kilometers with no water, with no sanitary pad. There is no way that they will make it every day to school. So they might lose like 5-10 days every month without going to school. And how are they going to compete with their boys mate in the school? So they will not make it. And then, or if they are able to somehow manage the primary school, they will not be able to get access to secondary school because the secondary school is even very far from their village. So girls' education, as easy as it looks, practically still many rural areas, many remote areas, many areas that are affected by conflict crisis, many areas that are affected by humanitarian crisis are not providing education to adolescent girls. So if that is the case, it's the scenario that we are facing in our continent is very much the red line, unfortunately, which is also impacting human capital development, which is also impacting the overall development that the nation is promoting for the continent. So that is why we are really focusing on adolescent girls. It's not one adolescent girl, it's millions of adolescent girls that we are talking about in this continent who are not having access to education, to menstrual health, to sexual practices, to access to contraceptive services, access to overall development programs. So their potential is really impacted before they even progress to their womanhood. And then once they are transferred to their womanhood, because of the lack of opportunities that we mentioned earlier, they are stranded. So it is high time that we have to continue advocating for adolescent girls, for their well-being, for access to sexual practices, for access to comprehensive sexuality education, and the broader picture of development. Not only the sexual reproductive health, but education is broader than sexual reproductive health. Employment opportunities broader than sexual reproductive health. So we have to address it from its holistic approach, and that is why we have to say we are saying adolescent girls, and the investment on adolescent girls is the investment on the development of the community, the whole development of the nation. So we have to keep on that advocacy. And as a start, this is what I can say, but later on I will share some figures when it comes to the well-being of adolescent girls and what mechanisms can we put in place so that this will be addressed in good time. Over, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Meron. I just think that insightful keynote has really linked towards sexual reproductive health rights and the demographic dividends. And I think one of the most powerful takeaways from that I have learned is that when we invest in girls, their health, their education, their agency, and the return is just not seen in terms of how personal it was for the girls, but even in the whole society. And that you have shown us that sexual reproductive health rights is not really just a health issues, but it's also linked to climate change, as we have said time and again. It's also a development driver, and it influences whether our girls are staying in school, whether we have delayed child marriage, whether we are ending that child marriage. And it also just assesses how we are changing the community. And I think that is why today's dialogue is very, very important for everyone. And to explore what Meron has just shared, and apologies, I just realized I wasn't on camera. Very sorry. Just to explore what we are from discussing, I wanted to invite to my panel, we have Ms. Meron again from UNFPA, we have Ms. Asma Mohammed from AfriYAN Ethiopia, and we have Ms. Letitia Miaka from the Young Women Empowerment Network Namibia, and also AfriYAN Namibia, just to join us to discuss this further. Please, Letitia and Asma, please confirm that you can hear us before we start.
We can hear you, Sharon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Letitia. Asma? Okay. Asma, if you're speaking, you haven't unmuted. Okay, I found you. Let me just pin Meron as well and Letitia, just so we can start. All right. I'll add myself to the pin as well, just so we can see our beautiful faces. Thank you. I'd like to begin also with Miss Meron. Meron, the State of the World Population Report that you've just shared just shows us how young girls are navigating crises with resilience, just based on your own personal experience as well as professional experience. You have over 10 years experience in girlhood. How can these insights be translated from data that you have shared to delivery? And what will it take to just transform that evidence into real impact for girls' leadership and protection in their societies?
Thank you, Sharon. Can I also again share my slides or?
Yes, you can. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So we have some good practices that are also highlighted in the SOP report, and as well as from some experiences from the region. The biggest challenge that we have is the fact that we are not addressing the issue of adolescent girls from its totality. We cannot address only education and leave out the other, or we cannot only address health and leave out the other. So we really encourage the government and all stakeholders to have really multi-sectoral approach. So in terms of that, one of the issues that were highlighted by the report is the fact that we need to work on human capital development as a national priority. Because we are not speaking about, we have discussed this so many times, we are not talking about few section of the population. We are talking about significant section of the population as a whole, when we are talking about young people, and then specifically adolescent girls. So unless we address the issues of adolescent girls from the human capital development point of view, it will be very difficult to address the challenge that they are facing now and then due to their SRHR. One of the issues within the multi-sectoral response in the human capital development is addressing the legislative framework and then strengthen child and adolescent protection. Many of our countries have addressed the legal issues when it comes to age of marriage, but when it comes to implementation, we are still lagging behind. Because of that loophole, still many adolescent girls are getting married before age 18, which is very unacceptable. And then beyond the age of marriage, you might also have heard about the age of consent for sexual activity and the age of consent for SRHR services. Most of our government stakeholders, if I may say, or even community members, faith-based organizations, they are confusing the age of marriage with the age of consent for sexual activities and for the age of consent for SRHR. And it seems like they are trying to align the age of marriage with all the rest of the consent provisions, which shouldn't be the case. Imagine if you are not allowed as adolescent girl not to have access to contraceptives just because you are age 16 and 17 when you are sexually active. And then if it is illegal to go to health service to and get access to contraceptives, it's huge problem that we are causing on adolescent girls as well as boys. And if we say a girl cannot provide consent to sexual activity, even when it is with her age mates, imagine the adolescent girls that we have seen in the schools, we have seen in the college before age 18, if they have boyfriend, then the boyfriend is going to be prosecuted because he had sex with adolescent girl, with his age mate. It's not good for the boys, it's not good for the girls. For the girls especially because this activity is illegal, If she becomes pregnant, she cannot get service legally. If she wants to protect herself from unintended pregnancy, she cannot go to a health facility because it is illegal. And then all the issues are very complicated. So because of that, these days they are forced to self-initiated child marriage. So that this provision could be legal for them, which is very unacceptable. And then we had this discussion this week as we speak with member of parliaments from SADC region. And then when you hear them, you'll be surprised how conservative and how unconsiderate they are. Please don't call me, but this is just to showcase that advocacy on legislative framework in terms of child and adolescent protection should stay within the advocacy framework that we are developing as adolescent girls. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for adolescent girls to get access to ESARO services, which will determine their education performance, employment performance, and their productivity. The other thing that we have to really consider within the adolescent girls development is the national strategy development. What is our national strategy, especially the development framework, is saying about adolescent girls? What kind of provision does it provide to adolescent girls in terms of making education accessible, inclusive education accessible to all, whether you are in cities, whether you are in rural areas, whether you are in humanitarian crisis, no matter wherever you are and who you are, what disability you have, whichever form you are in, as long as you are an adolescent girl, you are entitled to inclusive and quality education. Does our national development framework provide that provision to us? This is something that we have to assess as adolescent and youth champions and really provide our advocacy broader picture beyond ESARO, which will also give us more opportunity to speak with more policy makers. And then I have already discussed about the inclusive and quality education. What other sectors should we really consider in our advocacy? We shouldn't only focus on Ministry of Health, or we shouldn't only focus on those that are working only on sexual reproductive health and rights, which will really limit our advocacy coverage. So if we want to advocate for inclusive and quality education, what are the entry points? Because these are very important for adolescent girls. And then you can use the inclusive and equality education to also introduce comprehensive sexuality education, to also introduce menstrual health, to also introduce access to contraceptives and condoms and so on. Social protection. Most of our issues linked to child marriage, to transactional sex, and many other challenges are linked to poverty. So how do we address poverty? What social protection mechanisms are in place for adolescent girls not to be exposed to external challenges that will expose them to teenage pregnancy, expose them to GBV, expose them to HIV and other social ills? So what social protection mechanism should we advocate for so that we will provide comprehensive protection to adolescent girls? Health service, you know it very well, so I will not repeat on that. Role of justice. When my rights are compromised, when I was as an adolescent girl, and when I'm exposed to gender-based violence, when I'm exposed to child marriage, what kind of justice mechanisms are in place to protect my rights? So these are the sectors that we have to really accommodate in our advocacy framework. It shouldn't be only on health. That's what I would like to emphasize. And the social norms we have already alluded to. Why are we not allowed to provide consent for ESARO services? Because people think we are not entitled for contraceptives and for broader ESARO counseling and services, which is not acceptable. So which social norms should we address in our community, which are specific for Uganda, which are specific for Ethiopia, which are specific for Tanzania, which are specific for Namibia? And then within what framework should we address them? Is it within Minister of Justice? Is it within Minister of Education? Is it within Minister of Health? So that we will have broader reach of social norms and we will be able to change them. We shouldn't be only confined to faith-based organizations. What about the parliament? What about the social and economic caucus of parliamentarians? Do we have any access to them? Can we have conversation with them? So these are the kind of things that we have to address. The other thing that I would like to emphasize is in terms of coordination. We had a meeting like a month back with SADC sector bureaus to discuss about adolescent and youth development. And then you'll be surprised that planning is done in silos. Education is doing planning by itself without communicating the employment sector. Employment sector is developing plan without consulting education, without consulting health. You will be surprised how efficient those plans could be. Because it is the education that's providing input to the employment sector, isn't it? In terms of reforming our curriculum, in terms of modernizing our curriculum, in terms of addressing digital divide, in terms of modernizing and digitalizing our curriculum so that it will really fit the current job need that we have in the world, in our continent, in our region. That's not the case. My daughter is having a curriculum that I used to have like 40 years back. How is that going to work? And how are we going to work on the human capital development if we are not having this kind of coordinated conversation in a way that will see the totality of human capital development? So coordination is also something that we have to advocate for. If you really want to work on our development, please coordinate yourself. Please have a coordinated plan in a way that will talk to each other and well aligned and address human capital development. And beyond that, it should also have a space for CESOs. It should have a space for youth-led organizations, a space for you to be part of the governance so that you will be heard in a way that you will inform the overall development framework. So the whole issue that we would like to discuss today is we shouldn't focus on one issue, which will be a silo, but try to broaden up your advocacy effort in a way that will address coordinated needs of adolescent girls. Over, Sharon. I'm sorry I've taken much of your time, but just to show the broader picture of adolescent development beyond ESA region. Over.
No worries, Meron. I think we're learning a lot here. Just to read one comment from Abigail, it's that also on the legislative side, I think it's very wise for our governments to work with community gatekeepers to enforce laws that protect adolescent girls. And Kidis, I will share your question in the Q&A part, but thank you for your question. But Meron, thank you so much for grounding us on that reflection. I think something that has stuck with me is the age of consent and the age of marriage. It strikes that heart of what we're discussing today. Even around the ESA region, we find that these are two legal thresholds that don't quite align. A girl might be considered old enough to consent for sex, but not old enough to access contraception, for example, or health services, or she might be old enough to marry, but not legally protected from sexual exploitation. And I think even when those laws conflict, it's just the girls who end up not benefiting anyone, and they're left quite very vulnerable. And I think that's where the advocacy from the young people in Africa, the young people who are joining us today, becomes quite critical, just pushing for those systems to protect the young girls without silencing them, but just empowering them without feeling that they are being punished. And just to segue to asthma, I think your work really falls within that delicate space in Ethiopia, engaging communities and policymakers on issues in child marriage. We have female genital mutilation, and also girls' bodily autonomy. So how do you navigate these conversations in your community, especially where tradition, we have religion, and these laws often they overlap and sometimes they might conflict, and what helps people begin to see girls' rights not just as a threat to culture, but also as an investment to this young girl's shared future. So Asma, over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hello, everyone. This is Asma from AfriYAN Ethiopia, and I also work. I'm a youth advocate, and I also work as Sarah Foundation. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned is I'm sorry. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that the real change takes time, especially when you are working with community. Like beliefs and tradition have been held for a generation, and when you start to work, you really need a lot of commitment, because with good energy you start, and they have their own belief and custom for generation. So they're going, like, you might not see a change at first, but you have to be committed, and you have to use a lot of approach. Like, you have to be open to listen what's their idea, what they are, why they have this belief, why they have this custom. So the first thing you have to do is to listen, to be a good listener, and to be committed to work. And you have also to be humble, because sometimes they might rise, when you go to the community, they might rise issue like it is unacceptable as a human being, but you have to be, humble and try to understand their perspective. Even if it's wrong, you have to listen, and then you have to go and tell them your point of view, and you have to be consistent. As I said, this belief comes from generation to generation. You cannot change it overnight. So you have to be committed, consistent when you work with community. And when it comes to empowering girls, I work with an AfriYAN and also other institution in creating safe space. When we say safe space, we are teaching them how to be advocate, how to be a leader, how we are telling them how they are valued, their value. We are letting them to know their value, how they can work to improve themselves. And this is how we're creating a safe space. And how do we engage traditional and religion leader in conversation about girls' rights in harmful practice? Is you have as I said, you have to learn what they are saying, what their perspective. Because honestly speaking, for a country like Ethiopia, they're so essential to work with religious leaders and also traditional leaders. So you don't have to be opponent for their ideas, because what they believe is they're doing it for her benefit. So you have to talk with them how this is benefiting her, and be partner. We are also working to empower girls, to provide for them, to make them leaders. And I'm sure no leaders hate that. Therefore, they're really happy to be partners. But every time you work with community, you don't have to go and tell them your idea. First, you have to listen. And with religious leaders and with cultural leaders, you have to bring health expertise, telling them this how this is wrong. Especially, I'm working on female genital mutilation, and most of people think it's religious thing, and we go with religious leader and ask them how this is religious thing. and they tell us it's not really this, but it's a custom, and even if it's custom, there's not custom. They don't want to hurt women. So why this is happening, and we ask them to be partner, and then they're really happy to help and to teach in mosques and also in churches. That's how, like, we are partners. That's how we're working with traditional leaders and religious leaders.
Thank you, Asma.
I think Sharon, I have finished.
Okay. Thank you, Asma. I think that was very real. I think what really stands out for me is from what you said about being honest about the process, that change doesn't really come easy. I think for us as young people, even when we're thinking about progress, is that once we have something set on our mind, and for example, today we wake up and say we don't want this bill, and then the next day we give up momentum because something did not happen how we want it to happen. And because progress doesn't always show up immediately. And I think also, I love how you put the part about this work being about helping girls strengthen their values, just improving themselves, and just finding those safe spaces where they can just be, just to learn, to talk, and to grow within those spaces. Because even when you're speaking about taking advocacy to the community, we must think of it from a lens of, we're bringing, for example, new education. There's people who don't know what we're talking about. There's people who don't know about sexual reproductive health rights. They're learning afresh. It's like taking baby steps or taking your child to school. They're learning these new concepts afresh. And I think what matters is meeting people where they are and staying committed, and also remembering that urban solutions might not work for community solutions. Within our work in YACT, I remember when you were going to the community, and we used to think social media might work for these people, but no, it was talking, for example, in Samburu County when we were working there, it was talking to the Morans, because they're the middlemen. I mean, Meron has spoke about trying to see where we can get the community where they at, and those are the middlemen. They are the Morans. They are also the chief Kathis. They are the priests in the communities. Those are the people we need to be talking to if we need change to happen, and not just being in the urban centers and being on social media. Advocacy alone cannot work on that. And Letitia, it brings me to you and your organization all over in Namibia. It supports adolescent girls, including those living with or vulnerable to HIV. So what does leadership look like in your context, and how are these girls showing resilience and redefining leadership in their own way? Letitia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I must apologize. My camera is not working. But thank you for the question, and thank you for having me. So really, when you look at leadership in the practical essence, when it comes to Namibia, specifically the rural areas of Namibia, in the northern part where, for example, YWEN is based, you really notice that leadership is not as big or as as or felt as on a broader spectrum, I guess, if I should say so. So it's really in the small things. It's in the small things where you see young girls coming out and wanting to be part of girls clubs, wanting to be part of community engagements, where they are able to get the information that they need, roping in other young people, other young girls to get the information, especially getting access to SRHR related information, and getting access to contraceptives, and really just understanding how they can make the best decisions for their futures as young girls. You see it in young girls fighting back and deciding that they want to go to school despite the odds of child marriages, which is something that is very common in northern Namibia. For example, we have a practice called Olufuko, which forces young girls to get into, or encourages child marriages rather. And but you still see young girls say no to such practices and still want to go to school. So that is that is how you see leadership. And you also see it with young girls genuinely having a voice, speaking out about the challenges they face, the challenges their peers face, and what they want. So it's really in the small things of seeing young people wanting to change the trajectory of where they come from and wanting to change the status quo of how things are done. It is small advocacies in these clubs that they join where they tell us about the challenges that they face, where they speak out and say, this is being done, but it should be done in a particular way. We do not condone this. It's not, yes, they do not understand policies word to word or anything, but they just say, for example, why do I have to go to a clinic seeking for contraceptives, but I am questioned and criticized why I am having sex at this age? It is such things where you see proactive leadership that is not so big, but you can see the impact that it does, because with this type of things and strategies and actions from young girls, you are able to understand and to inform the strategies and policies on SRHR and protecting young girls, because there are so many injustices facing young girls. And you see that we can only tackle and fight these injustices when we have young girls informing the decisions that our leaders make, the decisions that people make, that even on regional level, organizations such as UNFPA, AfriYAN make, or the advocacies that they take out there should be informed by these things. So that is the type of leadership that we see. I think in short, that is how it looks like. And it's truly powerful and beautiful to watch, because young girls are taking action. It's really in taking action to speak up for themselves and be their own, and not allow people to speak for them, but then to speak for themselves and encourage other young people to come in. So yeah.
Thanks, Letitia. That was incredibly very powerful. I think I didn't know about what was happening in northern Namibia, and I think the image that you've painted of these girls fighting their way back to school even after child marriage, and standing up and speaking out and just becoming a voice for the others. That's the kind of courage that really defines this year's theme, is that the girls are leading from the front lines. I can imagine how scared they are just moving towards going back to school and learning education, and just doing things, not afraid of the people that were really pushing for them to be married at that young age, pushing for them to be done with their education, pushing for them to not have a secure future. And just before we open up to questions from our audiences, I think I had one last question for each of my panelists. So I'll just go back to you, Meron. From your experience in just policy and programming in UNFPA, and after hearing what Asma and Letitia have just shared, what do you think it will take for us to just truly make girls' leadership part of national development priorities, not just maybe making it a theme for days like October 11th, but just a year-round commitment from the national development government development priorities? Meron, over to you.
Thank you, Sharon. What we are trying to do as UNFP is to really advocate for the space, for the formal space that women-led organizations and youth-led organizations should have in decision-making places. Like, for example, Asma has mentioned critical challenge that Ethiopian girls, especially in certain regions, are facing because of really restrictive legal frameworks and restrictive social norms, which is really becoming so challenging for them to go to school, to complete school, to have access to health services. Mostly they will be married at very early age, and they will start giving birth. And then by the time they know the availability of contraceptive, or even by the time they are empowered to ask for contraceptive services, they have already 4 or 5 kids. And in how is they going to go back to school? And how are they going to be productive? How are they going to deliver themselves from poverty cycle is really challenging. And in just the way Latisha explained, already you are doing a lot in terms of the movement of the adolescent girls, young people, and so on. But the issue is, are you being heard? Yesterday we were discussing with my team leader. I don't know how many youth declarations and call to actions we supported in our career life, and even those who were in the business before 20 years or so, and going forward. For example, we are entitled or mandated to follow up ICPD, the International Conference on Population and Development, which was put in place in 1994 in Cairo. We commemorated the 30th anniversary last year in 2024. Since that ICPD, to the 30th anniversary of ICPD Plan of Action, you can imagine how many call to action that you put in place, how many declarations we supported, how many outcome documents we supported. Do we have any tracking mechanisms of these outcome documents, call to action, declarations, which are really beautiful, so mouthful, so expressive, which are really relevant even as we speak to the young people? But the way they are not tracked, the way they are not implemented, are really becoming so frustrating to all of us. What is the issue? Is it the matter of political will, or is it the matter of capacity? Is it the matter of lack of platform? Why are our member states failing us to really deliver those call to action in terms of really materializing the actions that the young people asked for? Do they know about them? Do we have any platform to track if these are being implemented, if they are being integrated in the National Development Plan that I mentioned earlier? When we are asking universal access to education, did the Ministry of Health consider that with its all packaging? When we are asking universal access to health, did they consider our ask about sexual reproductive health as well? When we want to be employed and be productive, did they consider the ask that we put in place in the outcome documents, in the employment strategies that the government put in place within their national development plan? That is what we are really concerned about. What are the platforms, the structures that we put in place in the governance system so that young people will be heard? If they are not heard, we are seeing what's happening. We have seen what's happening in what has happened in Kenya. We have seen what's happening in Tanzania. We have seen what just had happened in Mozambique following the election. When young people don't have the space to express themselves, to release their frustration, to express what they need, then it is a kind of bomb that will explode, isn't it? Or it is through the social media, or it is through unrest, which might not be even good for the young people themselves in terms of really distracting some of the infrastructures that we put in place from the taxpayers' money. It's not only from the government. When we are burning buildings, when we are burning cars because of frustration and anger, it's not good for the young people and it's not good for the member states. So before we reach that stage, before our frustration is so unmanageable because we are not employed, we are not productive, we are not getting access to health services, we are not getting access to education, we are becoming just annexed to the developments, then how are we going to release this frustration if the formal governance is not accommodating our voice? Yes, we have national youth forums. Do we have access to the national youth forums that we have in the country? How are we going to work together so that really our voice will be joined enough to challenge the government to provide the basic services that the young people are requiring for? I'm not asking you to go on the streets, but I really want to ask, how should we as UN agencies and you as youth movement will work together to really formalize your voice in a way that they will impact the national development framework, in a way they will impact the regional frameworks, in a way that they will be heard by Africa Union. And then Africa Union will hold accountable the member states. In the absence of that, if we are speaking within ourselves in a way that others are not hearing it, in a way that others will not really consider it to address the policy and programmatic and legal challenge that we have, as much as it is good for the learning platform, but in terms of really impacting the lives of adolescent girls, it might not be enough. So I think going forward, we have to really demand the formal structures for the young voice to be heard, for that formal structure to be part of the governance system in terms of really providing feedback to the member states. Yes, you have promised us this, but this is not delivered. This is not progressing well. This is really happening. Thank you for that. But we expect this to happen in the coming 5 years, in the coming 10 years, so that our lives will be different. We repeat the same thing again and again and again in a way that we are not seeing difference coming for young people in general and adolescent girls in particular. So that is what I really want to see going forward. You can advise us on how we will be helping you to transmit that message in platforms where we will be sitting with member states. And you have to also help us in a way that you organize yourselves in a kind of formal structure, in a way that your voice will be heard without really being frustrated and without it really promoting the anger. So we have to bridge the gap that we have in terms of communication between the decision makers and the youth movement and UN agencies, CESOs, and other members of the communities. This is what I can say, Sharon. Over.
Thank you, Meron. I personally feel called out from that message. It's that what are we doing to hold our governments accountable? And we keep saying, and I'm sorry to plug YPH over here, but we do have the Youth Power Tracker. Are you, as youth advocates, going on that tracker and giving us this data? Because we can't all be in all the 21 countries that we're in as the Youth Power Hub. We need this data from the communities and from the countries. And I want to also ask my fellow youth champions on the chat box. Meron has asked us a really important question. Why are our member states failing us? Why do you think your member state is failing you as a youth, as a young woman, as a young man in Zambia, in South Africa, in Ethiopia? Why do you think your government is failing you in that national development priorities? You can just type it in the chat just as a reflection. We'll be collecting those reflections later. And I'd like to go to Asma. You earlier spoke about staying committed to the cause, even when that change takes time. And just listening to Letitia's story in Namibia, what keeps you quite hopeful even when the progress is very slow? We've gone back to governments, we've asked them to center our priorities as young champions. So what keeps you very hopeful, even as you do the work in Ethiopia when progress feels quite slow? Asma, over.
Thank you, Sharon. What makes me hopeful, what makes me to change even though the progress is slow, is what I said is the progress is very, very slow, but still there's a progress. If I change the life of one girl is something instead of not changing a life of another. Changing one life is better than not changing life of girl. So for me, even though there is a little change, there's a change. So when we want to see a big change, it will take time, but when working with commitment, there will be change. And I really want to see and while working with commitment, well, no girl misses school because of her period, or more community will work to reject child marriage, FGM. I know this takes time, but there will be change, and through time, the number will reduce. That's my perspective, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. And just to go over to Letitia, I think your story is just a reminder that the girls are not waiting for permission, but they're already leading. I really liked that story about Northern Namibia, and I think I'll be reaching out to you just to hear more about that story and see how we can support those young girls. But just as we are looking ahead, what's one thing you'd want policymakers and the community leaders, even in your community, or even us in this space? We have UNFPA ESARO, we have YACT, the Amref Health Africa, we have AfriYAN, which is a very huge network across the 21 countries. How can we do things differently to make sure that those girls are heard and also supported in Namibia?
Thank you so much for the question, Sharon. I think it's quite a number of things. One, we need to give the girls a platform. Genuinely, we need to stop the culture where the conversations about the situations that young girls face, especially when it comes to SRHR, when it comes to even psychosocial support, or just accessing schools, and all the injustices that face young girls currently. We need to have the people who are experiencing these things firsthand at the table, where decision makers are, at the conferences, at on the regional aspect, at forums. These are the people that need to be heard, and they also need to be put in spaces where they can speak to their leaders themselves, because then they feel like there are people who are willing to listen, and it's not just the thing of they're speaking, and nobody's listening. When you give these girls a platform to speak, when you give them an opportunity to speak on the issues that face them, and how government, how agencies such as AfriYAN UNFPA can support them, they feel empowered, that the fight that they are fighting is not in vain, and people are out there, they're listening, and they actually want to help. Yes, that little that we do in communities such as teaching also does make a difference, but I think we really need to empower young girls by giving them a voice at big tables, and actually listening to them. And I think also number two is just support and funding. Unfortunately, there are people who are willing to help. There are people who want to make sure that young girls are not subjected to these things. Or even what is said is that some girls don't know that this is actually not supposed to be happening to them, that you cannot be prohibited from getting access to sexual reproductive services, that you cannot be told not to go to school because you have a man who has been arranged for you to get married to. You cannot have some girls don't understand that those things are wrong, and the education that the Young Women Empowerment Organization does in communities is limited in terms of the young girls that we can reach because of funding. Sometimes funding comes in, but then it's cut mid-year, and then the programs that you have started have to end in the middle, and you don't actually get to make the impact that you're supposed to make. So most of the time it's really funding, having consistent funders, consistent support, people who are ready to fund young girls, funding the futures of young women, young girls, and making sure that we protect young girls is not something that is like a pity, oh, let me just do it this once, but an actual commitment, because then we understand that the futures of young girls is important in our society. It's not something that we should be gambling with. It's not something that we should treat as a side, as something that let's just throw $1,000 here, $1,000 here once off, and then you keep quiet. It's constant efforts that need to be put in, and constant funding that is consistent to sustain and to make sure that organizations such as YWEN, and where a lot of organizations can sustain themselves and carry out the work that they continue to carry out, because the work that we do is important. It helps young girls have voices. In most cases, the only reason why you find girls want to fight out, to speak out, to take action against some of these things, is because they have people listening to them. They have people giving them information. They have people teaching them and helping them understand that some of the things that are happening to them are unfair and they should not be allowed in societies. And then they also understand that the government is there for them. Policymakers should make policies that protect their futures. All these things can only happen if we have people who are at the front line of ensuring this type of information and education is instilled in the young minds of young girls. And I think also is just putting young people at the, and not just young people, but young people who are working with agencies such as UNFPA, Young Women Empowerment, AfriYAN, all these agencies, putting those young people in spaces of leadership at high tables, especially in parliament, cabinet. Those are the people who are able to speak up for young girls. They are the people who are able to speak up on the issues that young girls face, because they work directly with these young girls and they can inform policy very well. So it's important. And you see efforts of even, for example, the government in Namibia, the number of young people, young women that we have leading is encouraging to see that we actually have young people who can speak up for the issues of young people, and specifically young girls. Our president, for example, huge milestone. We have our first ever female president, first ever in the history of Namibia, a first female president and a first female vice president, and speaker of parliament is also female. Those are great strides, because they also show young girls that it is possible. Their futures are not, they cannot be just thrown away. They have futures, and it's just important that we have people who can support them, and people are actually listening. So yeah.
Thank you, Letitia. Thank you, Meron. Thank you, Asma. I think all your reflection really bring us to this full circle moment, just moving from that advocacy to action. And I'd like just to turn to our audience. I'll start with our YouTube audience. We have a few joining from Kenya. We have Davis Banda from Zambia. We also have Lakmo, I think he's in South Africa now. We have Lois joining from Belgium, which is quite nice. A few comments from there is that it is very wise for the government to come in to support vulnerable communities in West Pokot, that's in Kenya, because the vice is very rampant in this area. Say no to FGMC. I believe one day we will get to 0 cases of FGM, and if you believe with me, you might give me a thumbs up. Just to go back to our audience, on Zoom, we have a few comments before I jump to the questions back to our panelists. We see Mthobisi says here in Eswatini, there is currently a rise in teenage pregnancy as well as new HIV infection cases. How best can I, or this is a question, I think this goes to Letitia and Meron. How best can we reach the young people, especially out of school, since there's a high rate of unemployment among the youth in Eswatini? We also have another reflection. Because we are not sure whether adolescent girls with smartphones have access to information on sexual reproductive health rights due to issues of network and internet data, just to mention a few. I think just for this is just looking how to work with other stakeholders. How do we work with the people who control the internet in your countries? So in my country, it is Safaricom. How do we work with them, even as policymakers, as NGOs, as youth advocates? How do we work to address these issues, and how do we reach these young girls, even offline? How do we creatively reach out to these young girls offline if the internet is an issue? Trinavante says there is slow progress. For example, in attaining the ICPD 25 now 30 commitments in Zambia, acknowledging the positive strides has really helped in keeping the motivation and hope alive, as well as doing our part in the communities. Thank you, Trinavante. We have Obedience. What an interesting name. I think the government is doing better, but the progress is quite slow in advancing SRE challenges, especially for adolescent girls and young women, given that policies are there and they look very good, but the implementation part. And this is why we're asking young people to hold their governments accountable. And that means having the right systems in place, having the research and data, because once you approach policymakers by just word of mouth, they're just going to look at you. But once you go with them with evidence, and I keep retaliating that, give us this evidence, upload this data under the Youth Power Hub tracker, maybe, and then we can have soluble solutions to tangible data to give these governments and to tell them what you're doing is not working, and this is what the young people are really saying on the ground. Just to address the questions to my panelists, I think the first question will be Kidist. Kidist asked, what's the best way to involve communities in ending practices like child marriage and FGM while still respecting cultural values? I think Kidist, this question was answered by Asma in her presentation. Mthobisi, I already answered that question. And then we have what makes to advocate for young people in Eswatini, even though there's little change. I think, Letitia, you can answer Mthobisi's question. I think what he's asking is more on how do we raise community change and how do we address issues on HIV and the rising cases of unintended pregnancies in Eswatini. I believe because we are all in Southern Africa, solutions might look the same, but also Mthobisi trying to also triangulate the solutions to what might suit Eswatini. So Letitia, over to you to answer that question while we scout for the rest of the questions to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and the question asked. I think truly what we always say is that we need to meet people where they are, and that simply means that if the people are at coca shops drinking, that is where you need to go. And information, you realize how much people do not have the information and just the understanding of how issues of child marriage, for example, are wrong in communities, how important it is for people to go to school, for children to go to school, especially elders. So you need to go into the communities and you need to meet people where they are and give them the information where they are. People are willing to listen and also collaborate with leaders in the communities. For example, one way that we reach a lot of young people, specifically the girl child, is through the church. We have a program with the church where when we want to carry out projects, the church helps us get the young children, the young girls in the communities, all of them, whether they are in school or not in school, because most of these kids are aware. They come to church, they have programs, Sunday school programs. So through that, we are able to reach as many young girls as we can. And actually, it's not even just young girls. Even if we need to speak to parents, we still go through the church. We still go through the schools, but truly it's just going into the communities, using counselors, local leaders, village leaders, headmen. Those are the people that we use to rope in the people. So we talk to them and we are able to educate the people. But I think also sometimes you said it feels like there's no change, but truly you don't see the change. You can't expect to see the change like just right there, like after one engagement, then you see change. I think it's over time. It's also having the resilience and the courage to continue going even when it looks slow. Yes, it's slow, but trust me, it is making an impact. And also just, I think Sharon was speaking about data. We need to continue to create data. I mean, to get data from the people that we we engage, in the communities that we engage, how many young girls are out of school? How many young girls have fallen victim to child labor, child marriages, abuse, all these things? We need to find out that information because it helps us. It helps us. How many young girls were out of school but are now back in school because of teenage pregnancy? How many young girls did not go back to school after falling pregnant? All these things. That information is where you see the actual change over the years, and that's the data that we need to keep. I think data is the only thing that can track our progress and you can really see the impact that you're making on communities. So I think it really also comes with resilience and perseverance. We need to persevere. We need to continue doing the work. It seems slow, but there is change. It is there. It is happening, and we just need to continue.
Thank you, Letitia. Just to read a comment, I had to go translate it. I need to learn French for the new year. Here in Burundi, we've made a lot of progress on women's health, sexual health, thanks to associations like Associations des Guides de Burundi, of which I am a member of, the national team. And they have raised awareness and advocated for addressing sexual health, a topic that was once a taboo, but no longer is. That's a very nice motivator also, even as we leave this webinar today. I have a comment from patients that we believe that FGM and child marriage will be a history in the grassroots level, when we fight this every day, making the community see tradition. Tradition is our death. Yeah. We have a question in the chat box. There was one that I had to translate also. Can't menstrual hygiene awareness also be promoted through educational discussions in friendly or safe community spaces? Meron, would you like to answer that? Also tying to Zach's question, how can we work with county governments to integrate sexual reproductive health rights into the blue economy and climate adaptation plans? I think UNFPA has beautifully let us know the nexus of climate change and sexual reproductive health rights. So I'll hand it over to Meron to at least tackle the two questions before wrapping up. Meron, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you very much for those who put the question in the chat. Let me start from Zach's question. I think we have to, and I would like to pick up what Letitia mentioned. It is because of your continuous and consistent efforts that we have appreciated some change in the community, some change nationally and even regionally. We cannot say everything is the same and nothing happened in the last 30 years. Significant changes have happened from when I was a young woman to now. But what we are saying is it's not enough. So who can you partner with at the community level, at national level, so that your voice will be heard? Is something that we were discussing earlier. Is it with a member of parliament? Is there any platform where member of parliaments discuss social and health issues so that you will be part of those platforms and really explain the challenge from youth point of view? Are there platforms for religious leaders and traditional leaders where they discuss community-related development issues, economic issues, social and health issues? You can map those platforms and really be present. And I also encourage you, I don't know how you see it, maybe at one point we will have that platform with YACT and AfriYAN to discuss with the national youth forums. I started thinking about them lately. These are the forums that are put in place by the government, by the ruling party usually, or sometimes they are not even politically affiliated, but they are well recognized for their being a youth forum, even if sometimes we don't believe in them. Have we ever approached them and talked to them to discuss really how teenage pregnancy is impacting the lives of many adolescent girls and young people that they are representing in the national platforms? do they know how CAC is really important for the lives of young people, despite the pushbacks and the conservative social norms that we have? Do they know how menstrual health programming is so important for adolescent girls to really make sure that they are going to school, and then that they are efficiently using the time in their studies. They are not affected because of the pain. They are not affected because of lack of sanitary pads or even access to water. These are the kind of things that they can easily promote through the platforms that they are having that you usually might not have. But usually, because of the line that we draw between the youth movements for SRHR, the youth movement for comprehensive sexuality education, the youth movement for the overall young people's well-being, and between these national youth forums that we think are politically affiliated, they might be. But these are the social issues. These are not political issues that they can easily understand and help with. So what I would like to say is really let us sit and map the platforms that are available and accessible and not accessible to some extent. If they are not accessible, who can we use and partner with so that we will be able to access the platforms that are not friendly to us, but very important for the well-being of adolescent girls. So that is very important. And then if we have the chance, and that also needs some level of navigation, when prioritizations are made at the beginning of the budget year or at the end of the budget year when evaluations are done, if we can have access to decide, to influence those decisions, that would be great. It might not be by sitting with the decision makers in the same room, but we know when budgets are decided. Maybe it might be June or July, or evaluation might be done in May. It depends from a country to a country. So if we create some kind of social media movement to say we need education to be prioritized, we need menstrual health programming to be prioritized, we need access to comprehensive sexuality education, we need this and that. And it creates significant movement in a way that they will appreciate the challenge that the adolescent girls and young people are facing. And then when they sit to address some of the issues, to prioritize some of the issues from the very limited resource that they have, then they can think about these critical interventions that we were talking about today and even before in different platforms that Youth Power Hub has arranged. So we have to also think the critical timings to make noise so that the decision makers will consider those voices in terms of really putting them in the planning process, in the strategy development process. So mapping which documents are being reviewed, which documents are being developed, which planning sessions are happening now. And then the timing will be really convenient for us to make noise on social media or any other platforms that we mapped so that decisions will be considering the critical issues that we identified. Otherwise, the movement is in March and the planning is done in July. So our consistent effort is very important, but hammering it when the critical time is coming will make it even fresh in their mind when they are doing prioritization, when they are doing budgeting, when they are developing strategies and plannings. This is what I can say. Over, Sharon.
Thank you, Meron. Just looking at the time, I think we have 3 minutes to end in the webinar, but I just wanted to invite each of you, my panelists, just to share one final thought or call to action for the youth, just maybe one sentence that captures what you want the youth advocates to do who are listening in to take away from the conversation. So I'm going to start with Asma, and then Letitia, then closing with Meron. So Asma, over to you. just one sentence that you'd like everyone to take home with. Asma, if you're speaking, we can't hear you, but I think we can proceed next to Letitia. Okay, can anyone hear me? Okay,
Yes,
Letitia,
sorry.
you're back. Okay.
Okay. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give my final, sentiments and remarks. I think what I want everybody here or listening and who is tuned in to take away is just the power of resilience in this whole fight. When it comes to making sure that we protect young girls and we make sure that we empower young girls, we really need to be resilient. We need to take on very, very strategic ways to empower young girls and to protect them and to understand that their futures are not, so we shouldn't treat them like it's just it's not important, for societies to grow, for economies to grow. We need to make sure that young girls are empowered, and we need to make sure that their futures are protected, that they have access to education, they have access to SRHR services. They are empowered enough to take charge of their own futures, and they understand what that means and what that looks like. So we really need to be resilient, and continue the fight. Continue the good fight. It is a good fight. It is important. It's needed, and we should continue to just be resilient and continue the fight as we go. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure being in all of you's company and in having an opportunity to shed light on the issues that we face as Namibia and the work that we're doing as YWEN. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Letitia. Asma, are you back before I hand over to Meron?
Yes, I'm back, and I'm
Okay.
sorry, the connection was so bad. Thank you for giving me this chance, and I'm really so thankful for participating on this. And today we have learned how we have to be committed and that we have to change the life of adolescent girls and girls, but it's in our hand to bring the change, and we have to be consistent and committed to bring a change and to empower the girls, to let them know their value. And thank you again for this chance.
Thank you, Asma. Meron?
Thank you very much, Sharon. It's very difficult to speak after the young lady's powerful message. Thank you, Letitia and Asma. It was really insightful for me also as someone working in the space. Changes are happening. What I can say is changes are happening, but they are very slow. And because of that, many adolescent girls are still suffering and their rights are compromised. So we have to really be fast. And I would like to pick what Letitia said. We have to also be consistent in our movement. And the resilience that she mentioned is very, very important because our job is not done yet. Actually, so much has to be done. The other thing that I would like to emphasize, as you have heard from the beginning of my talking point, is we have to position SRHR within the overall development. It shouldn't be a program that's running in silo in parallel. It is affecting development, and development is affecting SRHR. Climate change is affecting SRHR, SRHR is affecting climate change. So our politicians and decision makers should really appreciate the value of SRHR as something that impacts the overall development. So when we are planning development, we should also provide space for SRHR. So we have to really see those linkages, which are contextual and country specific. And whenever we do advocacy, please let us make it within those frameworks so that we will have more ears, so that we will not look like we are out of context. SRHR is part of development and it should be considered as part of development. It should be budgeted, it should be prioritized, and it should be actioned and it should be tracked. This is what I can say. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for the wonderful dialogue that we had. Hopefully this conversation will continue. Thank you again for the opportunity. Over, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Meron, Letitia, Asma. And as we conclude, I'd just like to thank all our speakers for sharing your experiences and your vision for us as young people. And just a special thank you to UNFPA ESARO, the Youth Power Hub, AfriYAN ESA, YWEN Youth in Action, AMREF, and all the participants who have joined us from across the region. And I just hope today's dialogue has reminded us that when we amplify girls' voices and investing in their leadership, we shape a future that is very inclusive for young girls, resilient, and very equitable. My name is Sharon. I have been your host on behalf of the Youth Power Hub and all our partners. I would like to thank you for joining this webinar. Until next time, we do have a few interesting trainings coming up on our side as the Youth Power Hub, and I really hope you're going to tune in. Letitia spoke about funding and sustainability for youth organization, and there is quite an interesting training coming up that is still in the planning and in the spanner works, and will be on resource mobilization and sustainability for youth organizations. So I really hope I'll see a lot of you there with your organizations, with your pen and papers, just ready to learn from the best. Until next time, let's keep turning this dialogue into action. Have a wonderful afternoon. You will be seeing a feedback form from myself, so I really hope you're going to get your insights on how this webinar was. And just from me to you, just wish you a good afternoon and a happy weekend. Thank you so much. So IT, over to you.